Go ahead and just say something for me real quick.
We're not going to record the whole interview with a click track. That could be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something to be said about rhythm for, interviews, but not exactly that kind of rhythm.
Can you tell me the story of Faust one more time?
It's a kind of not Faust story.
It was the story of a prophet.
Middle-aged man,
Exactly, yeah.
professor in university.
He was also an alchemist.
And he wanted to know all knowledge in the world.
At the end, he speaks.
But he can't.
Possibly began with fever or drugs.
The legend said that he made a deal with the devil for his powers.
And then devil appeared in front of Faust. And devil said to Faust,
This is CMN. Hello, everybody. Welcome. We're really glad to have you. This, of course, is Chaos Magic News. I'm Sound of Music Kennedy. We have an amazing guest today. Honestly, it's a honor and a privilege to have them. Benjamin Beardsley is a lot of things. I mean, calling him a Renaissance man in the occult world today is not an understatement, either in the amount of things that he has done or in the fact that over the years, I think his work will be more and more relevant and more prevalent. But in the most basic sense, Ben is an actor, a writer, a pundit, a teacher, a troll, a noob, and more than anything, a magician. Ben has spent the vast majority of his time since I've known him in Tokyo, where he's been both writing, acting, and of course, being arguably and maybe not so inaccurately self-described as the greatest chaos magician of his generation. He has many times been seen trolling through various occult places. I'm sure our listeners have seen his post, bringing out some of the most thought-provoking and interesting ideas in chaos magic, mostly by acting like he has no clue what the hell he is talking about. Ben currently has a Substack that, if you haven't read it, I strongly encourage you to go check it out. Again, the amazing hyper sigil that is True Bromance, which your fair newsman here has no shame in admitting he's not fully understand, is some of the most radical fiction I've read, not only this year, but probably in the last couple of years. So with that huge spiel out of the way, Ben, how you doing, man?
Holy fuck, man. I don't know. That was a real emotional roller coaster. I was real nervous until you got to the noob part. Yeah, good. How are you? I'm
great. I mean, nice. You and I both know, and we don't have to peel back the curtain for everybody, but we've had a handful of technical difficulties right at the beginning here, but it wouldn't be chaos magic if you didn't have some chaos in there.
Chaos in it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the first question, and it's kind of the thing that we've been rolling out with all the other interviews and all the interviews we have planned, but it's a real basic question that doesn't have a very basic answer. So I'm really glad to ask you among a lot of people, why is chaos magic important? Why should you care about it, especially today?
Wow. Fuck if I know.
That's the most honest answer.
Earlier about what chaos magic is, and I don't know. I mean, obviously, I do know a little bit about how it started, but I think whatever it was, now it's mostly an ethos. I think, and it's a kind of what do I want to say? It's like the 1970s punk DIY ethos of appropriating art for the people. So I think if it's going to be robust, if it's going to be important, I think the way it's going to be important is by putting tools into the hands of people, creative tools to explore how things work outside of existing paradigms, and sort of build your own relationship with whatever the forces that be are. I think maybe.
I mean, that I haven't gotten a better answer yet, so I'll go with it. I think especially because we both have writing in common here. I think one of the interesting parallels to what has happened with chaos magic today is really similar to what's happened with writing. In the most basic sense, I feel like especially a lot of modern writing, aside from, the commercialized young adult novel area, but even some of that, I suppose, has really been about taking older ideas and repackaging them in a way that actually gets at something interesting. I think and I guess even in, like things like television today too, one of the easiest routes to get someone interested in anything that you're working on is to just be like, hey, you remember this thing we did? What if we did that different this time? And I think chaos magic.
I think iterations are a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. No, you're good. You're good. I wasn't trying to cut you off, but I think chaos magic today has really taken off in that, there's two basic ways that people go when you start doing magic now, right? You either find a bunch of really old spells, or, even if old is just like Crowley at this point, but, older things, and you just try them out and see how they work. Or you just go like, you just find how to do a sigil and just start going crazy with it, right? It's either you're either trying to like find what has a purpose and what has a niche and how you can use it today, or you just start trying to make up whatever the hell you can. But even when you're making things up nowadays, it's like you'll be hard pressed to find someone that hasn't been like, oh yeah, this is a lot like, Spare, or a lot like Kenneth Grant, or, Peter Carroll, whoever you want to throw out there. Like, it's pretty common. But one thing I wanted to ask you about, especially, given that I kind of skimmed through True Bromance again before we were talking, as far as how magic has informed your writing, like it's like a really obvious thing, right? It's like, oh yeah, this guy's a magic person writing. But what actually got you to start focusing on writing as a magical practice, you think?
Ooh, good one. Let me take the long way to get to that, because you said a bunch of things that I'd like to respond to.
Go for it.
So you read True Bromance, which is the first iteration of a sort of fractal saga. I think iterations, when I think about nature, or I think about the universe unfolding, I think iterations are sort of a key, a fundamental thing that happens, a fundamental part of process. Nothing is complete until it's complete, and it takes multiple iterations for something to get there. So when we talk about chaos magic as like an iteration of magic, for example, by the way, I'm gonna take a little tangent and then come back to this. Let's cut that first part and just put this in. After you ask me the thing, let's say I want to define chaos magic as a postmodern punk rock DIY approach to applied spirituality that takes dogma out of the hands of a priesthood and puts the tools in the hands of the people at its best. At its best, that's what it is. But I also have concerns that it's already fossilizing into a dogma. You said you had a little riff about what is new, and how original things arise or something.
Right.
But it reminded me that when I was in school, I had a couple of coincidences where I had a teacher explain genius. And what she said about genius was that genius isn't creating something new. It's taking existing elements and reassembling them into a novel form. And then later in art school, not later, like within a year in art school.
That's later.
I heard a professor giving a lecture on collage, and he said what collage is taking existing elements and reassembling them into a novel form. And I was like, holy fuck, genius is collage. I think you're going to be hard pressed to find an original idea. I mean, Solomon couldn't, and that was a little while ago. So I think basically what humans do is we filter and reassemble. Like we filter out elements, we find patterns, and then we exploit those patterns to rearrange elements into a novel configuration. And that's sort of what I'm doing with Faust. It's obviously True Bromance is the latest iteration of this Faust cycle that I'm working on, which is a sequel and a reboot of the original Faust chat books, which are probably best known by Goethe's version and Marlowe's version before that. And when I got into it, one of the appealing points of the legend for me, which is also just pure hubris, was the idea that of all of the ways to become immortal, one of the easiest ways to become immortal is to attach your name to something that's already got legs. So the project started out as a way of, I think most art, it started out as a way of trying to beat death, but it's an explicitly magical project. When I started writing it, I thought it was going to be a very easy project. I thought I was going to spend maybe about 6 weeks taking this story and making a 2-act, one-man play out of it. And in the first act, I would be the philosopher exploring philosophy and talking about this deal he made with the devil. And in the second act, I tell the same story from the devil's perspective. But when I started to open up the story and look at what was inside of it, all of these weird treasures started to come out, and I started to have to learn, like, what is morality, what is mortality, what is magic, what is philosophy, and what is writing. And it became a big sprawling project that's still ongoing after 23 years.
Yeah, I was gonna say, when we first met, you were still doing various. You were working on the project, obviously, it's I didn't know if it was actually I didn't know does this guy just build his own mythos whenever he's working on something new, or is this really something that he's been just is this something that's become so ingrained in who he is that he kind of just drags it around with him whether he wants to or not? And I think,
yes and yes.
Yeah, right. Exactly. First off, I was familiar with Faust just tangentially before I met you, but I got more into it because of reading your work. I had a copy of Goethe's Faust that I got from I think it was my aunt or something. She just had a copy of it laying around, and I was like, oh, finally, I'll understand what the fuck Ben's talking about. It didn't exactly. No, I don't. But it made the problem more interesting, which I think is a lot of what you're looking for when you're looking at any sort of story that has that sort of depth to it.
Well, I think earlier when you were doing that lovely and hyperbolic intro of me, you mentioned the trolley part. I think for me, I have a real distrust of dogma, which manifests as a distrust of declarative statements, rules. And I would rather ask questions and be asked questions. I'd rather have questions than answers, personally, because I don't think you learn anything from answers. I think the state of being open and questioning sort of this radical agnostic position of what do I really know and how do I know it, leaves you open for more learning than having easy answers. And I don't think anybody really has answers to the big questions about life and beauty and you know, struggle and what it is and why. I don't and I don't know that answers are really relevant. Like you can trick people with answers into, you know, becoming followers, but like, you know what I mean? Then what's the point of that? They lose their humanity. So what's the value?
Having a nice cult with women that bring you grapes, I think, is the value in it. But
that where Faust is going. Yeah.
No, I agree with you entirely. There's a Kuhn quote that I'll mangle if I try to remember it, but it has something to the effect of the idea of answers are always shaped by questions, so you have to ask the right kind of questions and that sort of thing. It has to do with the way, you know, Kuhn wrote on what's the name of the book? It was the Structure of Scientific Revolutions. And I don't know if he was the first guy to really get it out there.
Paradigm shift.
Yeah, exactly. Crap, where was I going with that? Oh yeah. But Cornel West always talked about, you know, the quest for truth. It's like you never reach truth, capital T. It's always, you know, the journey towards it. And I think I can't remember. I'm sure someone smart said it, but because I know I didn't come up with it. But the more I know, the more I learn, the less I know. Right? You know, every time, I've spent, you know, the last at least 2.5 years really pouring into philosophy as a way to try and understand Magick better. And all it's done to me is start going like, you know, philosophy is just kind of magic. You know, it's just really setting up things.
It is. It becomes the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you know, again, take 5 minutes reading Hegel and just not tell me that like, oh, this guy's a big old wizard. He's just coming up with random fucking shit to come up that makes no sense until you start applying it. And then it makes everything make sense. You know, I
think even if we go into classical Kabbalah, right? Like there's the philosophical, like literally etymologically, the philosophical branch of Kabbalah, which is just searching for knowledge of, you know, the big whatever it is. And then there's the applied part, which is verboten, which is the magical part.
Right. Yeah.
I think Marlowe in his version of the Faust story quoted, was it Aristotle? I don't remember. I'm just going to say it's Aristotle because that sounds authoritative and it's good to have a name.
Yeah, obviously.
Who said, all I know is that I know nothing. But
yeah,
then he had Faust add, and that burned my heart. And that really informs my my quest with this story. I really do. The more I unpack what even knowledge is, the less certain I am of my fundamental assumptions about stuff. At least so far.
At least so far. That's the ultimate underpinning of Ben's Beardsley. He's like, at least so far. But kind of a question that trails elsewhere with this. You know, Faust is sort of it's a classic tale, both as a piece itself and with the sort of themes and structure that it has in the Western world. But you yourself have been in Tokyo for how long now?
A long time.
Right. I guess my question is how is because I know you were an apprentice under a Buddhist monk at one point, and again you've been in you know, you've been in the far off exotic land of Japan for so long now. It's like, go ahead.
That's two separate things, though. I was an apprentice under a Buddhist monk in New Jersey.
Oh, nice.
Full disclosure. And I came to, I mean, I'll tell a different story every time somebody asks, basically. But my narrative about why I'm in Japan right now has to do with deconditioning. I have a weird relationship with language, so that if people are talking behind me in a language that I understand, it's very easy for me to confuse their conversation with my thoughts. And at the time, as an actor, I was annoyed by the discongruity between what people would say and then the physical actions or gestures that they would do. So I was getting like a lot of noise to the signal, and I wanted to go to a place where I couldn't understand the verbal cues, so I would have to focus on the visual cues. That was an interesting experiment. I came to a country where people are psychic by culture.
Wow.
And have a sort of mechanism of politeness built into the culture that involves not showing your feelings, but on the other hand, they also have a cultural mechanism of like trying to anticipate and understand other people's intentions.
I mean,
I don't know.
It makes sense.
It's different from the environment that I write in, for sure.
Oh, definitely. Right. I can't even remember who it was. I think it was Guattari made the comment about how he thought that the Japanese psyche was impossible to penetrate with psychoanalysis. And I always think that's I mean, again, it's a weird statement to think about, but I think it has a lot to do with, our inability from our cultural standpoint to quite understand any other culture. I mean, again, even being immersed in it so much to a point that, you've been there for a while now. I'm sure there's a certain bias or perspective that you have that's from, just growing up in the States, obviously, that's there. But I think it's interesting to, I think it's I definitely have never heard that they're psychic as a culture. That's definitely a new one for me.
Well, I think that there was a kind of clear cultural divergence. Like, I don't know. Like, if we compare ancient Greece and ancient China, in Greece, dialectic emerged as a way of trying to get to fundamental issues. And there's this idea of focusing on elements, right? Like atomic elements. What's the most basic unit of this thing? Whereas in China, there was much more focus on the holon that we all exist in some sort of organic harmony. And because of that, Western culture generally evolved to be much more explicit and dualistic. Whereas in Japanese culture, the atmosphere and harmony are much more important than ego is for us. I don't know. It's complicated, and I really probably shouldn't be talking about it because I'm definitely not an expert. I've only lived here for 23 years. But it's definitely a different way of looking at things. One of the things that comes up a lot for me, which is so interesting, is I have a very great friend who's a little tiny witchy Oba-chan, a little old lady who I love to have tea with. She's also a writer, and she often says, like, I'll say something, I'll say my opinion about something, and she'll say, "You only think that because you're a Christian."
Oh man, yeah. I love that.
That's usually my reaction, which just bemuses her. But yeah, I don't know. It's
I didn't have Christian in my list of qualifications for you earlier. Man. Oh, wow. I remember you and I were having a discussion from one of your posts about what are they called? The Darumas. And we were discussing how like that, you're like, if, for our perspective, we look at that and that's like entirely like a weird, superstitious or even a magical kind of ritual. And for them, it's just like a thing you do. It's, like
it's a thing you do.
Yeah. It's you just do a thing.
It's still a ritual. It's still magical, but they would never say it's a magical ritual. I don't think. Right. I mean, we have a couple things here, in the States that we do, people knock on wood and such, but I think we're a lot more clear about that being like, we all actively, it's a superstition, but I just do it. Well, the other thing about the superstitious element is that, like, I think for Western people, Daruma is like a good luck doll, right? But it's the mechanism of the doll is the mechanism that made Weebles work, where like you knock it over and then it's weighted on the bottom, so it just rolls back up. And the what is it? The saying that goes with that is like fall down 7 times, get up 8 or something.
All right.
And it's more of a symbol of resilience and perseverance than it is like some kind of external force that's going to do anything for you, I think.
Right. I can get that. Well, there's a really simple way to bridge back into Magick there, so let's do it.
Let's do it.
How, again, as someone that tends to have this very heavily, model agnosticism sort of thing going on.
Oh yeah.
How much, I mean, again, getting you to give me a straight answer on this is one thing, but the intersection of magic as actual, force being exerted into the universe and then just placebo affecting yourself to success is a really thin line. And I'm always interested by it because I think a lot of people, as far as their practice is concerned, or when they talk about it, they'll say that they don't have a stance on it. But I think a lot of people fall one way or the other pretty hard. In fact, I can think of go ahead.
No, I'm sorry.
Well, I was gonna say I can think of offhanded 3 people I know that are incredibly hard up on there are spirits in this house right now. Then I can think about 4 more of them that are I don't know. I sage my house because it makes me feel good. So that's all that really matters.
Yeah.
As far as your experience doing magic, how radically do you shift back and forth from those 2 positions, do you think?
You mean in the course of the day, right?
Right. Yeah.
There's definitely spirits in this house, for sure. 100% there is. And I mean, how do you know there's a spirit? You can see it, you can hear it, you can smell it, you can feel it. You know what I mean? When you walk into a room, you can read the air, or not. You don't have to. How wooey do I get? My rational mind has little use for it. I don't need to think about supernatural effects. On the other hand, if I do need to think about supernatural effects because I'm having some kind of emotional desperation, and I do my mumbo jumbo, pretty consistently weird coincidences follow. So, I mean, I'm going to fall real hard right in the middle and say, I don't know if it works, but I don't mind acting like it does.
Yeah. I almost introduce you as the last true chaos magic magician because of this. Because again, you're one of the few people I know that I think is genuinely convinced that it's I don't have a good answer for any of this stuff, but if it works at the moment, it freaking works. So who fucking cares?
I mean, sure. There are basic rational levels where it does work. Like you were saying about placebo effect. That's huge these days, right? Placebo effect is getting stronger and scientists don't know why was a headline from a popular science magazine.
Yeah.
I mean, for me personally, my relationship with the universe is a relationship with story. Whatever the domain, if I subscribe to a scientific worldview, which, as a modern rational Western person, of course I do, I see that as story. And if I'm getting down with my mumbo jumbo, then I see that as story. Earlier, when you asked if I always mythologize when I start on a project, right now I'm working with a band and as their publicity manager.
Oh, wow.
And part of my job is building a mythology for them. I was super influenced by Joseph Campbell when I was a young artist. And before I got into Campbell, I was into Jung. And the reason I was into Jung was as a blueprint to the elements that I'm manipulating as an artist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I needed a model for what I'm doing. So I can't make claims to truth. That's just weird to me. But what I am comfortable saying is that when I relate to the world, I'm relating to stories, and I'll change a narrative to suit my purposes, like people do, consciously or not.
Oh, definitely.
So when I need to be superstitious, I can be as superstitious as anybody. But if I'm going to talk to somebody about it, if somebody comes at me with a whole bunch of woo and spirits and waha, then my question is always like, how do you know?
Yeah.
How do you know? Like, I understand that's your worldview. That's cool. That's fine. People have worldviews. Please don't try to make me understand that your worldview is the one correct and true worldview, because that's not going to stick.
Yeah, it's definitely not going to work. The one thing that really attracted me to chaos magic, especially because I got into chaos magic from Thelema, right, is how willing people were to be like, yeah, that's a load of crap, because the Thelemites really love, like, the old joke about if you ask a Thelemite a question, yes, two Thelemites a question, you get 5 different answers. They really like playing up that myth, that idea. But at least as far as my experience was, Thelemites tend to fall in like one of 3 camps. There's the anti-Crowley camp, the pro-Crowley camp, and the I am Crowley camp.
Nice.
Yeah, like those are the 3 camps you fall into as a Thelemite nowadays.
I mean, everybody that's a Thelemite for 6 months is suddenly the reincarnation of Aleister Crowley. However.
Oh yeah, that's why I've been telling everybody I'm the reincarnation of Victor Newberg, and this is my sad fate to just constantly meet every Aleister Crowley reincarnation. So I think the most interesting thing about narrative, aside from the psychology aspects of it, I think Lacan was the one who made a big deal about pointing out that we live by creating fiction, right? And not necessarily in the sense of fiction being false, but fiction being narrative.
Right.
I think and you're completely right about people changing narratives to suit their purposes in their everyday life. And anyone that had a parent that was not exactly on the up and up all the time knows that, because they'll immediately take, they're the kings of being like, oh, hey, you remember that thing I told you to do? And you're like, you did not tell me to do that thing. And like, I did. I told you 45 times. Now you're grounded. I think, part of it is the unreliability of memory, right? And
that's hilarious. I was just making a note of that. I just wrote memory is unreliable. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, do you remember writing
memories all the time? I think it's hilarious. Like one of the fun games I have with my best friend is we reconstruct memories of events that we've experienced, and it's often very instructive to me. Like between the two of us, we can put together a sequence and recall events, and there's always hyperbole. And I'm confident that our reconstructions are more accurate than either of our original memories, but we completely rewrite them in the course of reminiscing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm only saying me in that case as a kind of metaphor for you, the listener.
Right. Yeah. I've experienced that a lot too. Again, I grew up with a twin brother, and one of the quickest ways to figure out that you can't really trust your memory is 2 people that look the same and are both, admittedly kind of funny, trying to remember who said the funny joke at the party.
Oh yeah, it's really easy to appropriate other people's memories and to put people into memories where they weren't.
Mm-hmm.
I get this with my best friend a lot as well, where we'll talk about like, oh, do you remember that time? And then like, no, I wasn't there. Like,
well, I guess you wouldn't then. Are you sure? Because I remember you there. Think harder.
Yeah, you're definitely there in my memory right now. Yeah.
So I guess going to the memory area, this is probably an interesting thing. You mentioned that you became a hypnotist at one point.
Oh yeah. I had a phase.
A phase. That's most people when they have a phase, they like get a new haircut, start wearing a leather jacket. Right. Hypnotism's pretty rare on the phase. What brought that about? Especially, I guess, in terms of magic itself being such a big thing here. Like, where's the intersection of that for you?
Okay, well, there was quite an intersection. A couple of things happened. So I mentioned that I was interested in getting past spoken language. As an actor at that time, I spent about 10 years studying nonverbal communication. So I had a theater company in the States, and we were doing mask-based performance without dialogue to explore how clearly a story could be told more non-verbally. And then after I did that for a while, I thought okay, I'm kind of interested in understanding how words work now. And then I had this beautiful encounter at a bar with some friends and this woman who asked a lot of questions in the first half of the conversation while giving up nothing. She didn't follow the reciprocation rule of conversation, which I thought was interesting. And then she just crucified and dissected me in the second half of the conversation. And it was such a brutal experience that I had to spend 3 years alone in a room.
Oh, wow.
At that time, I had the resources to do that. I had to go to work 1 day a week. And then 6 days a week, I stayed in the room. I built an altar because at that time I was also interested in what ceremonial magic was. And I had a library that occupied the other 3 walls of the room. And I sent off a letter to my uncle who was a medical doctor. He had worked for the FDA, and he had also become a hypnotist in the 70s as an anesthesiologist because he discovered that using a combination of hypnosis and anesthesia, you could reduce the anesthesia by a significant percentage, which was better for the patient. And you could do things like ask them to control their bleeding or their heart rate, and they would be able to do that. So that was a useful tool for him. So he had a bunch of books on his bookshelf that he wasn't using anymore that he sent to me. So I got a case of books about clinical hypnotherapy. And I just studied Milton Erickson. And then I got into NLP as a way of understanding how the humans spoke. Starting with first generation NLP. And then I got to watch how that evolved and transformed into, the political discourse and public relations fiasco that it is today. Which was all interesting, but I spent also in that book, in that fateful box of books, there was also a slim volume that was something like a history of modern Western masculine consciousness in 3 stories, and the first story was Don Quixote, where the unconscious projects its dragons and demons out onto the world, but it's not really an issue because you can still take effective action. You can go slay that windmill or whatever. You can go slay that dragon or whatever. You just act on your hallucinations. And then the second stage of modern masculine consciousness, he assigned to Hamlet, which is the modern state of indecision, where you're torn between what your unconscious drives are and what you consciously feel like you should be doing. And you get that kind of paralysis. And I thought, I've got the Hamlets. And this guy's solution to that was Goethe's Faust, where you project your shadow out into the world and then you literally deal with your demon.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, this is cool. I'll have me some of that then. And, so when I said it was a phase, it's an ongoing phase. I relate to communication as hypnosis now.
Wow, that's amazing.
As for the connection between hypnosis and magic, I don't understand a difference. traditionally there wasn't a difference. The difference is just this modern mania for categorization, right?
Oh, definitely. Right. Okay.
So they both, for me, they both interact with reality on the level of narrative and symbol.
Definitely the easiest way to put it there. I just have to ask before we go anywhere else with that. You gave us two of the stories. Did you get to the Faust part in the Hamlet and just be like, I think I'm good here? Just leave the book. What was the third story?
The third one was Hamlet. So the first one was Don Quixote. The second one was Hamlet. Oh, sorry. The third one was Faust.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So when I read the Faust bit, I was like, oh, yeah. Let me do that. Let me do some shadow work real quick. I'll just spend 6 weeks on shadow work and that'll be done. And then I'll have resolved all my issues and life will be smooth sailing from now on.
I'm going to individuate. I'll be fine. Everything will be good.
I'll be fine. Exactly. Still individuating 23 years later.
I mean, there's worse things to be doing. I'm sure we all know plenty of people that are, still just fighting with their shadow on the daily and don't even realize it.
There's a lot of people who aren't fighting with their shadow on the daily and don't realize it.
Well, yeah.
I think in discourse, there's a funny thing where people often use talking points in lieu of thought, and they really believe that they have an opinion.
Yeah.
And it comes out just like it's structured exactly like they heard it. Like, I don't know. It's a quirk of of modernity, I guess.
I mean, a quirk is one way of putting it. I think oh God, where was I going with that now? Right. Gotcha. Just to tail back to the beginning of the conversation where where you were talking about the ethos of chaos magic sort of being, the similar to the DIY punk aesthetic of the time. There's a certain political element to that. And I think that's what made me think back to it was just the statement about, they think they have opinions and they just come out structured because, if you need to see an example of that, just spend 5 minutes in literally any social media forum about, where people are discussing politics, and you'll see the vast majority of them kind of regurgitating opinions, even ones that seem very eloquent and well thought out. But I think you're completely right that a lot of these people have become very caught in a narrative and that's what I mean, of course, I think we all are, but it's more of it's the ability to realize it, I suppose, more than anything at this point.
Well, it's also been intentionally weaponized. Like people do have a tendency to anybody that has had a friend for a long time and has heard their friend repeat stories understands, even if they're not conscious of doing it themselves, that we have stories and we repeat the stories. They go on a loop. We refine them over time. They get better with each iteration until they reach their final form, which, we keep repeating forever.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of our outputs are unconsciously very like their inputs. And I don't know. It just makes having conversations interesting sometimes. But can't you see it's true? Sorry.
No, it's all right. It's all right. What I'm curious about more than anything is if we look at magic today as something to be reappropriated back to, the normal people, or, maybe not normal, but, people, everyday people, the people.
The people.
Is there, do you think there's any sort of danger in the area of like what people will do with magic more than anything?
I mean, we've seen it recently in politics,
right?
Politics is also a funny word for me because it sounds like an abstraction, but it's really about allocation of resources.
Yeah.
I mean, Faust is a morality tale, right? Like when the first iteration of Faust was a chapbook in the early days of the printing press. It was a forbidden book, and the story was and it was scandalous, right? It was shocking. People were just being allowed to read, and of course, what they were allowed to read was the Bible and sanctioned commentary on the Bible.
Right.
So this sensational story of a rule breaker who makes a deal with the devil became a smash hit, you know.
Yeah, first anti-hero kind of thing, right?
The devil's always a charismatic character. So the moral of the story from the beginning was, you know, don't fuck with nature. I think a lot of don't fuck with the natural order. I think a lot of religion is a funny word for me, but I think a lot of religions in the world outside of the big three that Western people tend to think of when they think of religion have prohibitions against using magic to meet your own ends. And in my experience, magic can function as a kind of this is going to be a can of worms, but it can be a kind of karmic accelerant. You can achieve your goals faster, but also you get to recognize and deal with your suppressed issues.
Oh, right.
The reason that you're not achieving those things so smoothly right now is because you got some blockages, right? And those blockages might be a manifestation of some shit you might be better off dealing with rather than trying to, skirt around.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, I've got mixed feelings about magic as a practice. I don't know. For me, in my life, I navigate by it, which is, and if my son was to come to me and say, like, Dad, I'm here's my plan. I'm going to do some mumbo jumbo and then I'm going to be fine. I'd be like, son, please examine that plan.
Why don't you rethink about this? I know waving a wand to get what you want sounds like a cool idea, but I don't know if it's going to work this time, bud.
Well, also, you don't just get what you want.
Oh, right.
You get what you want plus everything that comes with it. You know what I mean? And sometimes that can be a lot.
I mean, I think most of the time it's a lot.
It can be a lot.
Yeah. I have this term that I've used for people because it's just a kind of a phenomena I've noticed, right? There's a subsect of magical people that I call them disaster magicians, right? And the only time I ever see them doing magic or talking about doing magic is when things have gone completely fucking awry in their life, right? And
well, no atheist in a foxhole, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But, but these are people that as far as like, again, they're in all the groups, they're in, they'll talk magic with you and stuff. But the only time I ever see them actually doing anything is always like, hey, my rent is due in 3 days. So I'm going to call up.
Abracadabra.
Yeah, exactly. And I always felt like that was like the biggest kind of tell for one of the bigger issues of being a magician is that if you spend your time, learning how to, ostensibly make things happen, you can get really complacent very quickly and think that like, everything, it's fine. None of my problems internally or, and none of the material issues of my life are going to matter because I can just magic myself out of it if it really gets bad enough. Right.
Oh, yeah. I know a smuggler once, a Nepalese smuggler who was talking about people's relationship with Ganesh. And he said, yeah, the time to pray to Ganesh is when you're in a cell on the border in the mountains and the police are going through your bags.
Oh, man. Oh, I love that. Oh, God. Ganesh Chaturthi was earlier this month or last month because it's the first now, but so right. It's I always love that because it's one of those things I never really even some guru in some video told me essentially like, Chaturthi, Ganesha come down and we all celebrate, everyone has a great time, and then at the end of it we put Ganesh in the water and then no one think about Ganesh no more. And I was always like, like that's kind of jacked up if you think about it, like,
well, it's a weird relationship.
Yeah, it's definitely different.
Yeah, I don't know. My kid's mom is mad at him because he only ever calls her when he wants money. So I guess it's like that.
Oh man. I'll tell a little bit too much about myself here, I guess. But I remember one of my formative experiences with religion being like when I was real young and my girlfriend broke up with me and I was having a terrible time in life. And I remember praying to God and then having the realization as I was praying to God, like, you're really coming to the most vital, fundamental force and being in the universe and being like, my girlfriend left me. I'm sad. Could you please fix it? And it's like, maybe that's not how you need to approach it. Like, especially considering that I was like I was for all intents and purposes, I was an atheist at the time. I would argue about religion with people and stuff. And then it's like, things are bad. Come on, God, help me out, buddy. Please, I'm sorry.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is really a theme for me. Like, it relates to the hypnosis thing. People, one of the big universals, I think, in a lot of theory of hypnosis is that people have a conscious mind and then they have a bigger unconscious mind. The unconscious mind is really the driver, and it incorporates a lot of habit and a lot of desire, a lot of suppressed stuff. And so when often what people are consciously has, of course, it has a relationship to what they are unconsciously, but a lot of the most rational people, I mean this is, I'm really trying to tell the atheist in a foxhole story.
Right. Yeah.
When people are in need, there is an ancient primal mechanism that just switches on. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Everybody prays in that last minute.
Oh yeah, yeah. The quick Hail Mary when you're falling from a truck.
Hail Marys, man.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's I think more than anything, there is and I say this as someone that has a lot of really hardcore opinions about the conscious and the unconscious. Mostly from reading too much Heidegger and being like, everything's Descartes' fault. Obviously, it's so simple.
Yeah, that's where the bifurcation happened.
Oh, right. Yeah, of course. But I mean, it's a nice point to blame, at least as far as modernity goes, right? You're like, what? If I got one person, I can make my freaking whipping boy philosophically. I can just yell about Descartes being wrong about things. But
absolutely,
I think there's a really base need for humans to have some sort of rapport and appeal to higher powers, if for nothing else other than a survival kind of mechanism, right?
Well, I mean, yeah. This is great. Can I just connect that to egregores?
Oh, please do.
So we know that individual humans are weak. But when we clump together, suddenly we are the most environment-changing species on the planet.
Right.
Like the amount of damage to the planet that one human being can do is nothing compared to what we can do together.
Yeah, we can all do it together. Destroy the planet.
Well, that's where it's going because of whatever forces, and I know who I like to blame, but whatever. What the larger point here is that intuitively we have a sense that individually we are weak, we're small, we're basically helpless against the elements, but and our nervous systems are such that we are basically, to use the modern metaphor, wired to function in groups. You mentioned cults earlier. Here's a piece of cult technology for all of you aspiring cultists out there, and there are many in this time of need and lack. If you want a loyal following, get them chanting and nodding their heads together, because what happens is that their nervous system's entrained, and they do connect with something larger than the self, which is a deeply wired aspirational need that we have for community. In the ancient world, exile was the big punishment,
right?
After execution, because you're not gonna. I mean, you might survive out on that island that they exile you to, but you're certainly not gonna thrive in solitary confinement.
Oh yeah, it's not. You're not gonna have a good time. You'll be there. You're not gonna have a good time though.
You're not gonna have a good time by yourself in the corner. And so I think that the religious need speaks to that. That the religious impulse speaks to that human need to connect with something larger. Like I don't know how far it goes. I don't know how big it scales. But my strong sense at this time, with the data that I have available to me, tells me that nervous systems love to network with other nervous systems, and that we thrive in community, and we sort of wilt in solitude.
Yeah.
And that's how egregores work in a nutshell for me at this moment. Whatever else they are, when you're reaching for some kind of identity, whenever you're evoking an identity, you're speaking to an egregore, I think.
That's there's a lot of interesting implications there for all sorts of things, as far as both like political movements and religions, and even I guess really like, magic in general, right? There's a reason that even though chaos magic as understood in like the 80s and the 90s is not really what a lot of us do anymore per se, there's still a reason that a lot of us enjoy having that label, right? There is a sense of identity and kind of how we operate attached to it as well.
I'm not just me. I'm part of an egregore. God damn it.
Yeah, exactly. Man, it's not just me in here.
I mean, it's not just me is huge, right? Like reality testing. How do we know what's real? That's huge for us. Like if you're in a room and you have an opinion and everybody else has a different opinion about something that happened, you'll start to question it. Getting back to that memory thing, if you remember something having happened and you're talking to 3 other people that were there and they all remember it differently than you do, is it just me? Thing is going to start bumping.
Oh God. Oh yeah. I mean, and it's deeper than that too. Cause, I remember, I was hearing, Bert Dreyfus talking about how deeply ingrained like certain aspects of socialization and culture are into us. And he's like, go into a restaurant and get a baked potato and then start eating it with your hands, and then start looking at how uncomfortable everyone else in that restaurant will be the minute they see you doing it. And there's no reason, there's no real reason you can't eat a baked potato with your hands, but people will actively be uncomfortable about it because there's a sort of, again, there's a connection here that we all like. No, all of us agreed, even if we didn't say it, we eat baked potato with a fork. Calm down now. You're messing with the order.
There's a kind of psychic immune response in an egregore, right? Like if you that ostracization thing, if you step out of line, the egregore is not going to like it. It'll react with antibodies. You'll get the memo.
Yeah, you'll know.
You'll know.
Yeah. Wow. We covered a lot more ground than I thought we would already. I had a list of questions from I don't have a term for it yet, but I was going to start. I labeled it in my notes as questions from the nuts, just to give them a bit of disparagement and love.
Let's give them. Yeah. Let's do some of those real quick.
Yeah. I was going to say we covered a lot of them. I think the one that we didn't get to was from you did touch on it briefly, but I think I want to ask more than anything, like, what really inspired you to do the noob questioning thing the first time? Like, what made you
Zen Buddhism, man?
Oh yeah, of course. I knew it. I was like, watch, he's going to talk about expedient teaching, isn't he? I
mean, Zen and Socrates.
Yeah. I gotta go find the meme.
Yeah, I mean, I can say my opinions, but what the fuck is that? You know what I mean? Like, I got opinions, you got opinions, everybody got opinions.
Yeah.
You know,
well, and I mean, like you said, I think if you want to have a conversation with somebody, you don't tell them what you think. Yeah. You start asking them what they think, and then you pick at it. And that's where you'll get any more of the fruitful conversation than anything. Because if you just say, well, this is what I think, exactly. And this is what you think. Go ahead.
I'm definitely more interested in exploring than I am in reinforcing my opinions and enforcing my opinions and forcing my opinions upon other people. I fucking hate proselytization, probably childhood baggage, but also, you know, being the child of colonialism, it's a little loaded for me.
Oh, right. Yeah. It's a little hard not to. You know, but I mean, I guess we can at least, you know, take solace in the fact that we actively notice it at this point. I've said that twice now, but I think, you know, hey, we notice things are kind of wrong here. That's at least a step in the right direction, hopefully.
I mean, consciousness definitely has its uses.
Yeah. It's for more than picking berries, folks. Just remember that.
Although it's definitely useful in picking berries. You don't want to pick those ones over there. You want to pick the good ones that you can eat and not have stomach cramps and die.
Oh, okay. Well, here's one we didn't get to. Someone wanted to ask about what's your personal beliefs about the afterlife.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I think that's a good magic question, right?
I mean, okay, so first of all, I'm going to preface this by saying agnostic AF. The thing that informs my current beliefs about, I have a need at the moment. I have an emotional need to believe in an afterlife. And what informs that need is my very, very rudimentary understanding of physics, which tells me that, well, although they did just break this rule, but they told me that energy is forever. I don't think of people as individuals. That's not correct. Of course, people are individuals, but for me, more than that, people are patterns, like algorithms of narrative. People are made up of stories,
right? Okay,
and those stories are made up of habituated energetic pathways. I mean, on a fractal scale, right? So the easy way to see it is, I mean, you can see it in people's routines or in their lack of routines, but you can also see it in brain structure, in preferences. And so I think this Egyptian idea that parts of your soul shear away, I guess it's also a Buddhist idea, that parts of your soul, whatever, the gestalt of you, shear away at different points. Like, I think we can see that happening naturally. Like, you know, when you're 3 years old and big chunks of your interconnected brain stop being connected because you don't need those connections anymore. You become a different person. You start being able to form memories. And then later, you know, your brain goes through different stages where different things happen. And then I guess there's an esoteric Hindu idea that you have different stages of life that reflect that. And eventually you want to retire as your senses start to withdraw from the world. I think we lose. So when you die, obviously you lose your physical ability to interact with and manipulate the world, the material world.
Right.
But patterns live on. Earlier, I talked about Faust and immortality. So there's a Viking idea. It's not just a Viking idea. There's an old idea that you live for as long as you are remembered in story or something.
Oh, right, yeah.
And that you is funny. Like we often talk about, like, can you separate the art from the artist, right? Can you separate the Crowley from the Crowleyism or whatever?
Yeah.
And it's difficult because if we talk about an artist, we use that reference. Like, I don't like them, meaning I don't like their work. I don't like the part of them that exists in my head now, right?
Right. Or if it's, someone that's maybe, has some problematic aspects and like, oh, like I really like their work, they're a piece of shit or whatever.
Yeah, but making that separation is challenging, right?
Oh yeah, it's but well, like, and it's a mixed bag. It's like again, of course, the easiest answer to that kind of just turns into like, well, people just use it in whichever way works for them at the moment, which is again back to just shifting narratives. But I think more than anything, I think the quest for some sort of immortality or the belief in an afterlife is probably one of the biggest driving forces of art. And it's like, I mean, it's like you said, it's like everyone, when musicians, everyone wants to just make the song that's going to be sung forever. And, it's like, whether or not it's an active decision of like, oh, yeah, if I make this song, people are going to remember me forever. Or if it's just the idea of like, well, something I do is going to last.
Well, I mean, it's like graffiti tagging, right? Like, I think the reason to tag is so that you can have a little piece of immortality. The same reason that Egyptians would erase a leader that they didn't like from all of the monuments.
Yeah.
Yeah, you no longer, and why I won't say some people's names.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know. So my feelings about afterlife are complex. As far as like an experiential, subjective experiential afterlife for the person who's after living, I don't know that we need that. Like,
right.
Where are you when you're in the deep, dreamless sleep? You know what I mean? Like
I'm in my bed usually, but
yeah. Well, ideally.
Yeah, ideally.
Yeah.
Oh God. Okay. All right. One more question from the peanut gallery here. Are there any magical or spiritual practices you regret actually spending any time on?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah. Anything specific spring to mind on it?
Yeah, definitely. Very specific.
Oh God.
Why would I publicize
it? Oh man. Okay. All right. I mean, fair point. I don't talk about my Devo phase.
So when I was going through my fuck around and find out phase, when I was going through it, I like putting it in the past tense because it sounds like I'm beyond that now. Yeah, I dabbled in some shit. I've been very blessed to have an occult mentor who is, I mean, he's my friend, but he's also a very well respected occultist whose day job is being a professor in an unrelated field. And when I told him that I was going to start dabbling in this particular branch of the occult, he was like, I don't know if I would do that. And then I did that, and then reality got real fucking wonky.
Oof.
And in the way that, like, like we can have conversations all day about theory of magic, but like reality moved to match my neurosis for sure. Like there were objective things happening that were just bizarre, in addition to everything going all Fellini all of a sudden.
Oh, nice.
Like, weird clowns just in the park and, decorated ram's heads for sale at a yard sale or whatever, just like,
sick.
Yeah.
I feel like you have to share because our listeners are going to want to go do this.
I would say like, I don't believe in magic, which was not adequate protection for me at that time.
Yeah.
So be careful out there, kids.
Yeah. I mean, I think every person that's doing magic has to have at least one experience of being like, shit, fuck.
Yeah.
I want reality to go away, but it's not going away. Fuck, what do I do?
I mean, yeah. Also, Saki wrote The Monkey's Paw, right? And everybody read The Monkey's Paw and they were like, oh, that's hilarious. And everybody wants a monkey's paw,
Yeah, exactly.
So, good luck. Good luck reinventing that wheel.
Yeah, have fun with it.
Have fun.
Have fun.
Or whatever you need to have out of it. Yeah.
You'll I mean, you might as well have fun. You won't have much of other options by the end of it. But
I mean, if you can get to the point where you can laugh at the absurdity, at least there's that.
Yeah, at least you have that. Well, I mean, honestly, I guess here's a good place to end it, right? As good as any. we end where we begin. So, really, thanks for coming on. This is probably one of the best conversations I've had in a minute, even if it was kind of all over the place, but it fits the theme of tonight for me, at least. So,
nice.
With that being said, you have anything you want to plug or anything you want to say to all the people listening?
I will. Yeah. Good luck and Godspeed with your work. Big W work. If you are so inclined, please check out the Beardsley Randomizer on Substack. That's where I'm that's where Faust is evolving. Eventually, there's probably going to be a book in it. But for now, you can see it in bite-sized episodes. Feel free to interact if you would like to see more of something over there or don't understand what the fuck is going on. Let me know. I'll be sure to note it, even if I don't clarify anything.
Yeah, everyone check it out, please. Again, it is some of the best writing I've had the pleasure of being able to read over. Again, I mean, a good chunk of my year was spent having kind of settled into the new place that I moved. And one of the strangest pleasures I got was at least looking in my inbox and being like, oh shit, Beardsley wrote something else. At least I have something to do this morning. So,
wow, that's sweet. Okay. Well, with that being said, I'll get back on that because it's been a little bit fallow for a moment because I've been busy with other stuff. But I did just recently start to relaunch it, and I will get more regular with it. I'm a little bit challenged with this thing right now because I live in Japan, which makes it difficult for me to receive money easily from the United States. On the other hand, that's where my audience is. Well, the United States and Europe. That's where, and sorry, fuck, cut all of that. The English-speaking world is where people read and understand my shit, and it's got no relevance or traction over here at all. So it would be nice to be able to, receive a cup of coffee for a story or something. But I'm looking for a workaround. If anybody has good ideas about that, please reach out.
Well, I gave you my option where, just become a VTuber, but I don't know how well your work will translate to that.
I mean, people have also asked if there's going to be an audio component at least, and it's possible, but it really is an issue. Like, Patreon doesn't work with receiving money outside of the country. There's no real easy, Japan's really good at being very detail oriented and meticulous to an extraordinarily anal retentive degree when necessary. So I'm working through it, but
material conditions fucking us again. But tell you what, whenever you do find a workaround for it, I will not only throw it into this for people to look at, and then they can be like, hey, Beardsley found a workaround, so go give him some money, but I'll have you back on and we'll just talk about like, well, here's why you need to give Ben money.
All right. Yeah. Let's talk about why you need to give. That's always a weird one for me too. Cause basically money is not my big driver. However, Mammon has made it quite clear that he's got his foot on my neck. So
let's just be real. Everyone hates money, but you need money to get a sandwich, and everyone loves a sandwich.
The point. I love sandwiches.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to come through and just buy me a sandwich, we could do that.
Yeah. All right. Sweet. Well, all right. This has been Chaos Magic News. Again, the only news outlet that is actively underwritten by the Illuminati. As always, if you have any answers to the JFK shooting or Bigfoot's location, please speak them out loud to your device right now. An FBI agent will be dispatched to you. You can check us out on Facebook and Instagram at Chaos Magic News. You can also check us out on Twitter at Chaos Magic News. And other than that, Ben, you want the last word?
I will take the last word. Thank you so much. It was lovely.
Yes, thank you. And again, big thanks to all the listeners and thanks to Ben. We really appreciate you. We will see you next time.
PhD. I know this is going to be a little weird. Yes, that's right. I'm so passionate. I've been suspecting this, but I know this is going to be a part of that imagination. I'm the writer who's imagining you.
Oh, God. Now we have the nice little ending issue because my mouse turned itself off somehow. So now I gotta freaking end the fucking call. And that's fine. I will give all of them this just so they can marvel at the amount of chaos that happened tonight. All right.
It was lovely, man. Thank you so much.
I'm pretty shy. Watchers, sir. Sincerely. Challenge accepted.